Well, I want to welcome everybody back. We have been talking about Luisa Piccarreta's life. We are going to dive a little bit more into Luisa's, after her death, the events that happened, all the theological works that were done after her death, and her opening of beatification as well. We'll look at that today. And so we'll continue. We left off last time here on this one. We're going to start here where it says after her death. So we'll begin. As part of the beatification process of Luisa, in 1995, the Vatican Publishing House published in Italian the official biography of Luisa entitled The Son of My Will, written by the experts on the lives of saints Maria Rosaria del Genio. There are also translations of this book in Spanish, English, German, and French. And Maria Rosaria del Genio is dedicated to writing on mystics, and she spent 5 years writing the biography of Luisa. In an interview, she declares that the name of the book, The Son of My Will, was given by Jesus himself, a title given to all of us. The book, The Son of My Will, contains a preface written by Cardinal Jose Saravia Martins. He's a prefect emeritus of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints under the papacies of John Paul II and Benedict XVI. The cardinal also says in a text, the profound testimony of Luisa Piccarreta draws people to a profound unity with God. This living in the divine will, the main aspect of Luisa's revelations, is the actual way in which the Son, Jesus, lived on earth. Bringing here with him the life of heaven, Luisa transformed her entire heart into a dwelling place for God's love. God alone, Those who knew her felt drawn to the truth of heaven. It is precisely in everyday life that the mercy of God seeks out humanity to restore them to the innocence of Eden. So this is from the introduction to the book, The Son of My Will, by the prefect emeritus of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. The epilogue to the book, The Son of My Will, by Archbishop of Trani, Barletta Bislegli, and Nazareth Giovan Battista Picchieri. A source of great wonder is the vitality evident in groups thousands of miles away from Corrado, lands where Christianity is still new. I am thinking of those groups in South Africa and many groups in the Philippines and the outreach taking place in Australia. One cannot forget the many groups in the United States, Mexico, and many other countries in Central and South America, as well as all the new groups of the faithful in Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Colombia, and Venezuela, for example. So there's another also commentary on Luisa by Cardinal Martins in the occasion of her anniversary of her birth. So this is on the occasion of the 149th anniversary of Luisa's birth, April 23rd, 2014. The Cardinal Martins in Rome wrote, "This petite woman from southern Italy who experienced a succession of various epidemics, 2 wars, and who dried many tears shed because of the difficult living conditions of the people around her, transformed her entire heart into a dwelling place for God alone. Those who met her felt drawn to the truth of heaven and compelled to live a life of holiness, a life spent entirely engaged in ordinary everyday activities, modeled after the family of Nazareth. And it is precisely in the everyday that God's mercy seeks out humanity to restore to them the innocence of Eden, to a life filled with joy and to an existence guided by the certainty of being God's beloved children." There's also has been 2 theologians who's written books on her writing. The first one is Father Joseph Iannuzzi, who completed his doctoral thesis in the Gregorian Pontifical University in theology entitled The Gift of Living in the Divine Will from 2012. and it took him 10 years to write it. And also Stephen Patton in theology from the Franciscan University in Steubenville presents the book, A Guide to the Book of Heaven, Luisa Piccarreta's writing evaluated in the light of Catholic doctrine from 2014. So now we are going to be looking at the first meeting of priests from all over the world in Corrado, Italy. It took place on June 2010. So a group of 35 priests from 15 countries gathered in Corrado, the town where the servant of God, Luisa Piccarreta, was born, where she lived and she died, together with the local Archbishop, Monsignor Giovan Battista Picchieri, to participate in a 4-day retreat on the theme of the divine will. So these are Luisa in the church as an institution. So Luisa was accompanied by a total of 17 priests, including confessors and occasional celebrants, periodic visitors who accompanied her throughout her life. The confessors were also the first reviewers of her writings. So she obviously had a very unique case, and her confessors were never her spiritual directors. So a mission that our Lord wanted to reserve for himself, actually. And Jesus himself was her teacher and guide. She listened directly to his voice, teaching her, correcting her, reproaching her if necessary. And Jesus gave Luisa throughout the whole of her life the accompaniment of a minister for her care and custody. And no other soul has had this kind of care from the church. And this is from the source, the Son of My Will. Guadalupe, is there anything you want to add to this before I move on?
No, just to emphasize that these slides were written to tell us how much Luisa was beside the church, or the church beside Luisa, to show us how she was living with the company of the confessor as Jesus wanted, because Jesus wanted the church to be witness of everything, and at the end that the church will be the ones who will say the word regarding the divine will all over the world. So we are looking here as the writer of the biography that she says is the only case that the confessor were most for not as spiritual directors, who was Jesus. The teacher of her was Jesus, but to review everything that was happened with her, and to review letter by letter what she was writing. So when we heard that they said against Luisa so many things, we should to remember this, that the church was following her day by day. You can go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just to note some notable confessors of her as she was going, Michel de Benedictus, who was her confessor as a child, he instructed her to eat at least once a day, but she always returned it whole. Father Gennaro de Gennaro, who was her confessor for 24 years, and he's the one who actually asked her to write everything that was said to her. And Saint Annibal Maria de Francia, who was her ecclesiastical reviser of her writings. I believe it's the Hours of the Passion and the volumes, the first half of the volumes. And also Ferdinando Cento and Francesco de Benedictis. And so these are some of the more notable ones. So I'll continue. So the bishops who are related to the life and the cause of beatification of the servant of God, Luisa Piccarreta. In the natural order, I have not made you lack anything, either confessors, communions, and all the rest. Indeed, you, loving only me, did not want confessors so often. And this is from volume 11, March 20th, 1912, and from volume 23, February 28th, 1928. Then your confessors passed on to the other life will be like the prelude of the children of my will, because the first one sacrificed so much and worked to help the little field of your soul. So see, these are some of the bishops. So Luisa in the church as an institution. So there were actually 8 popes who knew about her, and 2 of them actually wrote about the aspects of the divine will. We actually have no proof that any of these popes knew about the divine will, besides, the process of beatification of Luisa. And 4 prefects knew her case as well and wrote about her directly, as we saw before. 3 of the Congregation of Saints, so Cardinal Emeritus Jose Saidaba Martins, Cardinal Angelo Felici, Cardinal Pietro Palazzini, and 1 of the Congregation of the Faith who wrote about the divine will, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, who was known as Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger at the time.
It is said that there is no any saint that has such a follow-up of the church. Luisa is the only one, and this is something that we should keep it in our mind.
So Luisa and the world. So Luisa Piccarreta and Saint Hannibal Maria de Francia. So Saint Hannibal Maria de Francia was one of her confessors. So Saint Hannibal was born on July 5th, 1851 in Messina, Italy, and died June 1st, 1927 at the age of 75 in Messina, Italy. And from 1910 to 1927, Saint Hannibal had a close relationship to the servant of God for 17 years. He was her extraordinary confessor and appointed ecclesiastical censor for publications in 3 dioceses, Trani, Barletta, and Bicicleci. He dedicated himself in a particular way. He really took his time as a censor of Luisa's writings, edited and published them after having obtained the imprimatur from Archbishop Leo. There are at least 69 letters sent from Luisa to Father Hannibal and 21 from the priest to Luisa. And one of these letters, St. Hannibal said to Luisa, "These are writings that must be known to the world." Here we see the cover of the first edition published in 1915 of what is known today as the 24 Hours of the Passion, which Luisa is believed to have written between 1913 and 1914. He made 4 editions of this book. So on the 24 Hours of the Passion book, it was recorded by witnesses that St. Hannibal actually visited Pope St. Pius X, and when he was listening to the reading of the 24 Hours of the Passion, the Pope said to St. Hannibal, "Not standing, Father, this book must be read on your knees, for it is Jesus Christ who speaks." And St. Hannibal actually had a charisma of forming priests and nuns. And in 1887, he founded the Congregation of the Daughters of Divine Zeal. And in 1897, the Regocianists of the Heart of Jesus. He published 4 editions of the 24 Hours of the Passion, twice in 1915, in 1917, and in 1925. Also, he published an appendix that for the first time reported few pages of the diary under the title Treatise on the Divine Will, and a letter to bishops recommending to use these books in the formation of priests. And he also opened up a convent and hospice for girls in Corrado of the Daughters of Divine Zeal. On October 7th, 1928, invited by Saint Hannibal when he was still alive, Luisa moved to live in the convent and the convent orphanage. On that occasion, in volume 25, October 7th, 1928, Jesus told Luisa very happily, "My daughter, this group of people in motion for the opening of the house of my divine will is symbolic of that group of people when I wanted to be born in Bethlehem and the shepherds. This pointed out to all the certainty of my birth. In the same way, this group of people, all in motion, points out the rebirth of the kingdom of my divine will. So now in this group of people, of little girls and nuns, I recognize the beginning of the kingdom of my divine will. Oh, how my heart exults and rejoices, and all of heaven makes feast." Luisa lived with the nuns of divine zeal exactly 10 years until the storm of 1938. And on October 7th, 1938, she was asked to leave the convent. Guadalupe, any additional comments on this page?
Just to emphasize how happy was Jesus in that moment, and when you knew about this named storm of 1938, you will see how painful was this situation for him. Just to remark that he was very happy.
The Rogosianist priests supported St. Hannibal in typing the manuscripts of Luisa so that they could be edited by the printers. And when St. Hannibal died, and more after 1938, they neither kept nor guarded the writings for fear of being persecuted by the Holy Office. Everything remained hidden in such a way that for his canonization, it was not there were books edited by the saint included in the forbidden books. During the process of canonization of St. Hannibal, Luisa's writings saw the light of day once again. This happens during the pontificate of St. John Paul II, and when Cardinal Ratzinger was prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Saint Hannibal was beatified in 1991 and canonized on May 16th, 1994. And from volume 23, February 28th, 1928, we read, "And do you think that the memory of Father de Francia, his many sacrifices and desires to make my will known to the point of initiating the publication will be extinguished in this great work of my divine fiat, only because I brought him with me to heaven? No, no. On the contrary, he will have the first place, because by coming from far away, he went as though in search of the most precious thing that can exist in heaven and on earth, of the act that glorifies me the most, or rather, will give me complete glory on the part of creatures, and they will receive complete goods." Saint Hannibal de Francia wrote, "In many ways, these revelations open new horizons, not contemplated until now, concerning the mysteries of the divine will, and about operating and living in it. And one thing is certain, even before arriving at the complete knowledge of what it means to operate and live in the divine will, one who reads these writings cannot fail to be enamored with the will of God and to not feel new strong impulses and a divine commitment to transform all of himself in the divine will." And now we're going to come to know a little bit more about the relationship between Luisa and Saint Pio of Pietrelcina. Padre Pio, a Capuchin friar, was born on May 25th, 1887 in Pietrelcina, Italy, and died September 23rd, 1968 at the age of 81 in San Giovanni Rotondo in Italy. Father Bucci relates that Luisa and Padre Pio knew each other, although both were confined, one to his cell and the other to her bed. Father Bucci mentions that the witnesses did not want to talk, but they saw a Capuchin friar sitting next to Luisa and did not see anyone enter. It had all the appearance of Padre Pio. And these are the quotes. Suffices to say that a single act done in his will takes heaven by assault. And this is from a letter from Luisa to Federico Abresh. I'm here to tell you to always hide in the fiat divino. We'll get to the assurance of holiness from Luisa's letters to Federico Abresh. So it is known since 1930, Mr. Federico Abresh, a photographer close to Padre Pio and sent by him, visited Luisa and corresponded with her, and acting as messenger between Father Pio and Luisa. Padre Pio, on the occasion of the of the confiscation of Luisa's writings through Mr. Abresh, said, "Dear Luisa, the saints serve for the good of souls, but their sufferings knows no limits." Luisa's Vatican biographer mentioned Federico Abresh felt himself to be a devout spiritual child of Padre Pio and faithful disciple of Luisa. And to the best of his ability, he lavishly shared it, joyous over the good he saw in those who embraced it. This is referring to the divine will, and he named Luisa as that angel in Corrado. So shortly before his death in 1968, St. Padre Pio made a prediction concerning the future influence of these writings. The world will be full of Luisa. The third millennium will see her light. Also, Padre Pio's spiritual daughter, Adriana Palodi, asked him if he agrees that her contribution to some publications of Luisa, that he asked him if he agreed that he contributed to some publications of Luisa, and Padre Pio agreed, and this encouraged Adriana to establish the House of Prayer for the Divine Will in St. Giovanni Rotondo. Anything additional here, Guadalupe?
These stories have been written here because they have a continuation in other years. So just to remember by now that Padre Pio bilocated to visit Luisa, and two of his spiritual sons and daughter were continue the cause of Luisa in the towns where Padre Pio was living. At Padre Pio church in St. Giovanni Rotondo, there is a house of prayer for the divine will. So you can see what a saint we recognize, what sanctity we recognize in Padre Pio, and he was encouraging the Luisa cause, however he knows. And you saw, for example, in the story of San Hannibal, that even he was dead, many years later after his death, San Hannibal was working for Luisa too, because in his beatification cause, many things were open, and you will see these stories more in depth in the next slides.
Okay, so St. Padre Pio mentioned to Rosaria Bucci that Luisa is not a human factor. She is a work of God, and he himself will make her emerge. The world will be astounded at her greatness. So go ahead, for Luisa is great, and the world will be full of Luisa. So now we come upon Mexico and the writings of the servant of God, Luisa Piccarreta. We are going to be talking about Jose Luis Acuña Romero, who was born in 1943 and died in 2003. In 1985, Mr. Acuña lived in the Diocese of Aguascalientes, whose bishop was Ricardo Guizar Diaz. Mr. Acuña shared with his bishop about the Divine Will writings. And in 1989, after a visit to the Pope at Libna Apostolorum, Bishop Guizar took advantage of his visit and went to Corrado, where he also visited the Archbishop of Trani, Monsignor Giuseppe Carrata. So as a result, he thinks about Mr. Acuna paying a visit to Cardinal Ratzinger, and this was in 1990, that it cannot be that such a gift of God is hidden in the church and totally unknown. This is a quote from Bishop Ricardo Guizar. And Bishop Guizar extended to Mr. Acuna a letter to visit Cardinal Ratzinger. In May 1990, Mr. Acuna went to Rome. In the meantime, he went on a visit to Carrata as well, met Bishop Carrata, and learned that Father Hannibal was to be canonized. Monsignor Carrata gave instructions to Mr. Acuna for his interview with the cardinal, asking at the end of their conversation, how is it possible that they were going to beatify Father Hannibal being included in the forbidden books with a book edited by him? And at the same time, the book of the 24 Hours of the Passion appeared in Corrado, dated 1938, written in German by a priest Ludwig Beda, a Benedictine scholar of mystics and a well-known publisher. Mr. Acuna succeeds in obtaining an interview with Cardinal Ratzinger, and Cardinal Ratzinger told Mr. Acuna that he had never heard of Luisa Piccarreta. He asked him, where are those writings? Mr. Acuna told him, well, you have those writings in the Congregation of Faith. And Cardinal Ratzinger replied that perhaps they had not seen it in the right way. And Cardinal Ratzinger told Mr. Acuna that he would study the writings to understand if there were no heresy issues in them. And Bishop Guizar indicated to send more of Lisa's documents to the cardinal, especially those in which it appears that there is a bright future for the church. Later, Bishop Guizar went to Rome in October 1990, representing Mexico in the Synod of Bishops dedicated to vocations and seminaries. In 1990, the Eighth Ordinary Synod, the formation of priests in present circumstances. And he told Mr. Acuna that the first thing that happened to him is that he found in his room the invitation for the beatification of Father Hannibal. And he said to himself, the only one who really knows what is going on here is me. He asked to speak to Cardinal Ratzinger, who told him that all of Lisa's writings must be approved. This was still in October 1990. And 4 years later, the nulla obstat, that is to say no obstacle, was issued to initiate the cause of beatification of Luisa Piccarreta, according to the current directives. And this was in February 24th, 1994. And in 1994, the cause was initiated. So everything about Luisa must be approved, Cardinal Ratzinger said to Monsignor Guizar. Any additional comments here, Guadalupe, about this whole process?
Well, you can see how all around the world, at least somebody is working for Luisa Cosa. In this case, we have this Mexican contribution who was very high because as we mentioned in a slide before, nothing was known about the relation of Luisa and Father Hannibal de Francia. Everything had disappeared. So they were going to canonize Father Hannibal without knowing what had happened and without knowing that the book edited and in some areas written by Father Hannibal was in the index of the forbidden books. So when the Cardinal Ratzinger knew that, you can imagine how he felt. And in a miracle way, a book in German that the Cardinal Ratzinger was from Germany appeared in that moment. This book was lost, and a lady found it in Suiza and sent it to Corato. exactly in the week that Mr. Acuña was appearing there. So the Monsignor Carata said to Mr. Acuña that he mentioned that how is possible that they will canonize Father Hannibal being in the index on books written for him, and to give him this book in German. So Monsignor Carata was thinking very smart to prepare everything for that moment. So the contribution that happened with Mexico in the 1990s was so great, because you will see in the next slides how this contributed to open the process of Luisa, who was hidden. Nobody knew in that time about her.
So the writings route to Mexico. Father,
If you let me here to explain this one, because
go ahead.
the arrows disappear and the relationship will be difficult. But why we were talking about Father Pio? Because Father Pio and his spiritual sons did a lot for Luisa. The photographer that we mentioned before kept some books, as we will see in the slides that we will present later. But there was another priest who was his spiritual son too, who was Father Gustavo Morelos. This will explain how the people in Mexico knew about Luisa. Father Morelos was living with Padre Pio and went to Corato, sent by Padre Pio. And in that time, he was using a white dress. Two priests, including Father Gustavo Morelos, went to Corato. And Rosaria Bucci saw them and remembered that Luisa says that in the future, two priests in white will come, that Rosaria should to give them everything she has to them. That's how Father Gustavo Morelos got some books. And the canon Don Benedetto Calvi, who was the last confessor for 21 years of Luisa, he kept a lot of remembrances and a lot of things about Luisa. And then the other one was the Father John Olin Brown, who born in Texas and died on Corato in 2016. He was ordained priest in Trani. His first mass was given in the same church that was the tomb of Luisa is now. And when he was in Iowa, he learned about divine will and Luisa, and he decided to go to Corato. He went to Italy to study theology. And then he was there on the time that the church started to open the cause of Luisa, and he contributed a lot. You will see how. So these are the main actors that opened the process for Luisa to Mexico too. For example, Dr. Tomasini, which we know a lot, got some books that were obtained by the Father Olin Brown, for example. So continue with the other that we will see how the thing is going.
So Father Morelos was one of the spiritual sons of Padre Pio, as was mentioned before. And once he asked Padre Pio if I could be his spiritual son, and he accepted me. Padre Pio gave him one of his gloves that he used to cover the stigmata. He knew Father Pio since 1957, but he heard of him since he was a child. He mentioned in an interview he gave on May 6, 1988, to Maria Saraco that he was looking for a priest who was reported to have appeared in the sky toward the end of World War II. Finally, he knew that it was Padre Pio. Also in 1965, Father Morelos spent 3 months studying the apparitions of Carabandal. Father Morelos was the founder of the community Sons of the Divine Will in Florida. Rosaria Bucci became a witness of Luisa, and she told her that 2 priests in white will arrive in the future and also will work for her cause. Rosaria identified Father Moralos as such, and he obtained from her the original manuscripts of volume 35 and 36, and also copies of volumes 11, 12, 13, and 8, and others as we see in the next slide.
This is a letter, like a note of request from Corato in 2015 when Father Morelos died. And this confirms that Father Morelos had many originals.
So in 1972, Jose Luis Acuña Romero learned of the writings brought to Mexico by Father Morelos through the priest's brother, who was his employee in an accounting firm in Mexico. And the names underneath that, Guadalupe? Tere, Naranjo, Blanquita.
What Mr. Acuña did is that with some of his, let's say, colleagues of the first year kindergarten, first, second year of primary, he mentioned about these writings, and then he did the first group to read these writings. We know that the group was formed by Tere Naranjo, somebody named Blanquita, Joel Galván Talledos, and Salvador Tomasini. This is a group of Mexican people who first studied the books of Luisa.
And on the top right-hand corner, we have a picture of the team of 4 priests and 2 ladies who worked 4 days at the Vatican archives, copying the volumes hidden for 58 years. So that it was Mr. Thomas Fahey, Father Thomas Celso, Father John Brown, Father Carlos Masu, Father Michael Adams, and Mrs. Miguel Machado. So in 1996, February 2nd, 1996, Pope St. John Paul II allowed the copying of the original volumes of Lisa's writings, and that's the picture. So of these copies, there were 2 editions, and one was sent to Mr. Jose Luis Acuña to help transcribe it. But at the time when the copies of the originals happened, Jose Luis Acuña came to my house and told me that the Italian transcription of book 1 was lost, and we wanted to see if you could do it. Of course, I started to make the transcription of book 1, and before I finished it, he told me, "Can you make the transcription of all the books?" Dr. Tomasini said, "I saw it as a gift from heaven. Blessed be God, all the books, the 24 Hours of the Passion plus the Queen book." The transcriptions were sent to Italy, to Father Brown. And Dr. Tomasini says that after transcribing from the Bari dialect into Italian, he originally, thinking of his family, kept translating the writings from Italian into Spanish, and with some support from a lady who spoke Apulo Pugles. When he was transcribing book 19, Mr. Acuña was on book 18 that communicated that they were both translating into Spanish. And it seems that he did not like that, but he asked Mr. Acuña to pass on what he was translating. Then a friend urged Dr. Tomasini to open a web page, which he finally did, and from there he started to put the writings on the internet. So his first invitation to a weekly meditation group on the writings and a retreat was extended to him by Father Daniel Gagnon. And from these beginnings, he participated in meetings, retreats, virtual groups, and is invited to give retreats in the United States. And in Texas, he was invited by Father John Brown, and from there he goes all over Latin America and parts of Europe. Father Brown years later told him that the writings had been sent to him at the direction of Mr. Acuna, which he was shocked to learn. Guadalupe, any more commentary for this one?
No, just that we know how these books came to Mexico and how at the end Dr. Tomasini translate these books that we have now in our hands and that we are studying. He translated directly from the originals that this father, son, spiritual son of Padre Pio brought to Mexico. And can you imagine how is God that at the end, the brother of this priest was working in the company of Mr. Acuña, and that's how the root of the writings were finishing in Mexico.
So there are aspects that we must take care of, recommends Dr. Salvador Tomasini. We all come from the same source, but we do not all want to adhere to the Book of Heaven. We all want to see our part. We have not abandoned the total of our habits, neither Adam nor leftover of human will. Distort and prevent people from entering this medium of the divine will by not adhering to the Book of Heaven. Minimize divisions, creating groups that look like sects, regulating even clothing outside the Book of Heaven. Jesus says that he will take care of his writings and that Luisa should not worry in the least, that he will take care of them. Guadalupe, did you want to continue on or did you want to stop here?
Let me see the hour, and if there are some questions until here.
Well, I have a question.
Go
Yeah.
ahead, Patricia.
Yes, in the first, I think first or second slide, and I took a brief note about when it says also San Padre Pio daughter, Adriana Palotti, asked him if he agrees that her contributed to some publications of Luisa's writing. So that means that if Padre Pio is given permission, even agreeing, says here, agrees with Adriana Palotti, one of his spiritual daughters, and even with Father Morelos, right? That I understand that also it was his spiritual son.
Yes.
So I wonder, so Padre Pio knew about Luisa, and in other, I understand that in other saying, Padre Pio, what are you doing here? You can go back to Luisa, right? To some people coming into confession. But my question is, so if Padre Pio were encouraging, his spiritual daughter's sons, I wonder, he knew that he followed divine will, or we really don't know for certain, right? That's my question.
What we know now is that he knew for certain, because both spiritual daughter and son that were mentioned, Federico Abresch and Adriana, got the books. Now we know that Federico Abresch had copies of the books, and Adriana got from Federico Abresch.
Okay.
And she asked Father Pio if she can contribute to the distribution of that books that was in 1930 something.
Okay.
So the letters that the Federico Abrich exchanged with Luis shows that Padre Pio knows a lot about Luisa, and some words I mentioned here that, for example, he says that Luisa is not any saint, that Luisa is the saint.
Oh, okay.
And so what happened is that Father Pio was in somehow condemned to live in his cell. So he, with his body, was not going outside. And Luisa was a victim in her cell too. So both of them were confined, if I can say like
Confined,
this.
exactly, confined.
Confined. So saying like this, publicly, they didn't relate it, but witnesses that no one, but at least 2 times, Father Pio was be located in the house of Luisa. We don't know how many times more. Huh?
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question too, actually.
Go
Just
ahead,
to
Paula.
confirm, so when the beatification process of Saint Hannibal was happening, they did not include the writings or his editorial writings of the Hours of the Passion and the Queen of the Divine Will. Is that right?
Is that right? Nothing about Luisa was related with Saint Hannibal in that time. Excuse me, because the Rogationists and the nuns of the seal were did everything to undercover all relationship of Saint Hannibal with Luisa, because they afraid of the uh, they are afraid that the Vatican will do something against the cause of San Hannibal, that they were thinking to make him saint since the beginning, because they knew what sanctity has Saint Hannibal. Huh? So they decided to cover up everything. So when the cause of Father Hannibal was conducted in the Vatican, nobody knew about the relationship with Luisa. Even in the Vatican, they didn't know about Luisa at the time. As Cardinal Ratzinger says, that he didn't know anything about Luisa.
Mhm.
Everything disappeared. And the books, were not really, they were not in the index, except one. The others were in the warehouse, if I can say, of the Vatican,
Mhm.
but not in the list of condemned books. They couldn't find it. This group of 6 persons who went there took her time to find it, because they were not in the list. So if somebody was not making effort, everything of Luisa could have been without knowing.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you.
And to say something that it, for me, when I was finding these stories, I said it's interesting to see how God is making his way in the history of the humans. Huh? In the Bible, we saw how he was making the story with the people of Israel, but now we are looking how he's making the history with the people of the divine will. And it goes from country to country, from person to person. And well, for example, Father Morelos went to Garabandal, and from there he decided to go to Rome. The situation with the Mr. Acuña is also something unbelievable. And then how Dr. Tomasini appeared on that scene is a miracle too, as he says. I see this like a blessing of God. So what can happen to us too is the question. Hello, Paris. You want to ask something?
Yeah, hello to everyone.
Hi, Paris.
Well, I think it's impressive, all this stuff, all this biography. For me, it's a grace, or because I'm here in Mexico. Maybe I don't see in that way that to show us, but it's a great grace from Mexico, I think. And yeah, for me,
A,
something very,
a blessing.
yeah, really blessing, I think. But I think something very important about Luisa, it's that all this comes from the church. And that is the guarantee that all her rights comes from God and the Catholic Church. And this is so important to us because she has a priest almost all her life. When she begins with the current state, and that to show us this is the work is from God. We cannot deny this beautiful work in her, I think. People can deny all this, but the facts is the most important thing. And I don't know what. Also, she receives the Holy Eucharist every day, and that is impressive. I don't know if another saint has this gift. I don't know. Maybe not. But she depends on a confessor all her life, and that is this why we are fortunate for this creature and for this gift that God give us through her. The most important and the true biography is the Book of Heaven, made a reality in her soul. We need to live the Book of Heaven in our souls too, like she did. And we will never stop to say that. Read the Book of Heaven, because that is the true life. Continually put this life of God in act in us is the most important thing. And that's the why of these writings, you know? Sometimes, and I think that is the reason of the Book of Heaven. The Book of Heaven is our life. It's not only a book. No. It's our life. And we need to have this life in us. This is the real work of Luisa and Jesus and Mother Mary. We are so lucky to live in this time. And sometimes we waste time in other things. But I think they take advantage of it because it is a very special from us to live in this time. The aim of the divine will. And yeah, like I said, it's a very special grace from Mexico because the light from the world comes from Mexico. I saw it in that way right now, or I see it in that way. And that's why our mother chose Mexico to be the light of the world. And that's why she came to Mexico to give her son to everyone, to everybody, to all the world, to show this gift, to show this light for everyone. So let's do it live in this divine will. It's all that I want to add. So
Yes. Well, we are not in the final, but this all this story of Luisa, uh, for me, when I was reading and writing it, I said, "Oh, Luisa is something special that I was not imagine." And oh, how God is moving the things as He says to Luisa, I will take care in my time. This is the only thing in His time. And whatever we hear against, we should not to pay attention. With this story, we had everything complete and the truth of God.
yes.
I would
Well,
like to say something as well. And it's like adding to what Badis was saying, is that he was saying that the book of heaven is our life. Well, yes, because the book of heaven is Jesus, is who really Jesus is, and we were created in his light and image. So it's so beautiful. But then I thought about a lecture that is in volume 17. That is when Jesus takes all the books and he puts them on, like in his chest, and then he says this. He says, "I bless these writings from the heart. I bless each word. I bless the effects and the value they contain. These writings are part of myself." Isn't that beautiful?
Oh, beautiful.
Each word is part of himself.
Can you repeat the volume 17?
Yeah, 17, and the lecture is 13.
Okay.
And then after that, he called some angels, because there were two priests that were supposed to read those writings. But then he called the angels, and the angels just bent down, right? And he told the angels this. He says, Jesus told the angels to touch their foreheads in order to impress in them the Holy Spirit, so as to infuse in them the light in order to make them comprehend the truth and the good which are in these writings. The angels executed that, and Jesus blessing us all disappeared. This is so beautiful, because we on the slides we were talking about the priests, that in Lisa's life the priests were every single day of her life. I would say the priest was there. Sometimes they didn't go because of some reasons, because it was part of her process. But the majority of those years, the church accompanied Jesus, and that is very, very significant. But one thing that always points in my head is that they were not her spiritual director. They were only her confessors.
yes.
And that is something very important that we should understand. A priest can only be a spiritual director up to what he knows. After that, he cannot be a spiritual director.
We, d- we
So
don't
when
need
Jesus,
we don't
sorry,
need a spiritual director.
we don't need a spiritual director, because there's another
Jesus,
lecture in the book of Genesis. Jesus
Jesus
says,
is
I guide you, right? And I teach you. And also his mother. They're the only two that can guide us and lead us to where we were created for. That is to live in the violation, in the, I don't know how to say it in English, in the divine how do you call that, violation? In the divine
Volition.
violation.
Volition.
Yes, in the
yes.
divine volition. I'm sorry, Baris, that you were going to say something.
No,
So I'll just keep quiet from now on. I got all excited.
he's our spiritual director. Jesus,
Mhm.
Only Jesus. The
Only
book of
Jesus.
heaven. Well, Luisa, our mother. That's all. We don't need any more.
Mhm.
We
This
just
is
need to read, to
Yeah,
read,
read so
to
important.
read, and of course to ask the Holy Spirit to, for us to understand
Read.
what we read, to comprehend it, because it's not the same to read and understand. Understand is in the mind, but comprehend is living what you read, what your intellect is telling you what it means. It means live it. It's a part of you. So that's where we're heading.
We need to practice every single day
Mhm.
to have this life in us. Read.
Yes.
Well, everybody can read, but this is not important. The most important is every single day practice. Every single day put in practice all these writings in our soul.
Mhm. That's so beautiful. Thank you. Just because in the last couple of weeks, I think the divine will definitely has taken been a lot of attacks against the divine will, especially in the English
Yes.
section. And so I was actually just looking at some of the videos. And so this is a very positive thing that we're talking about, how Luisa was hand in hand with the confessors and with the Catholic Church
Mhm.
throughout her whole life, and re-emphasize that. So this is great. This is positive.
Well, if anybody else has anything to say, we can stop here and then we'll meet next Wednesday to continue the extraordinary life of the ordinary Luisa.
Yes.
Take care. God bless you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.